Everything, says fitness expert Sal Di Stefano, is telling people from every angle to do things in a way that's going to make them sick, fat, and unhealthy. To be healthy is an act of rebellion. And in his 2021 book, The Resistance Training Revolution, Sal bluntly tells us the fitness industry has been plagued with more myths than ancient Greece. Mind Pump host and fitness trainer Sal Di Stefano on fitness and faith now. My name is Todd Warner, and this is the Evangelization Culture Podcast from Word on Fire. Sal Di Stefano is the co-host of Mind Pump, a health and fitness podcast that rocketed to become the #1 health and fitness podcast in the world. As a fitness expert and entrepreneur, he worked his way from personal trainer to commercial gym manager to running his own fitness studio, employing hormone and nutrition specialists, acupuncturists, gut health professionals, and meditative and bodywork providers, along with other fitness trainers. Currently, Sal is one of the most sought-after experts in fitness and health with his effective, grounded, and easy-to-understand style of communication. He has been on hundreds of top podcast shows and frequently speaks at trainer and health practitioner events. His passion for fitness, health, and people is unmatched, and he is steadfast with his goal of making the fitness industry one that is a force for good, with long-term health being the focus and not one that is riddled with diet pills, crash diets, and false promises. One of Sal's many quotes summarizes his approach to fitness and health, saying, "Exercise and eat right because you love your body, not because you hate your body." Sal Di Stefano, welcome.
Thank you so much, Todd. I appreciate that intro. Thank you.
Segment 1, A Painfully Skinny Teenager. In a 2017 podcast interview, Julie Bauer asked Sal Di Stefano how he first found himself drawn to the fitness world. Beginning at age 14, Sal recalled, "I was motivated by what motivates most people, which is insecurities. I was skinny. I wanted to build more muscle, and so I got into lifting weights." So, Sal, to begin with, tell us a little bit about the painfully skinny teenager you once were.
Yeah, I grew up in a kind of a hyper masculine environment, and I was more of a bookworm. I like to watch TV, and so I noticed and I felt that I was a little bit different than, let's say, my cousins, and maybe the way that my father tried to connect with me. So I had already developed a bit of an insecurity, like I maybe wasn't enough or good enough, I should say, to kind of fulfill those standards. So that was with me for a little while, and then once you become a teenager, I think it's natural to become more self-conscious and self-aware, and you get a couple comments from people like, "Oh, you're skinny," or "You need to eat more," but it really hit me pretty hard as a kid because I already had kind of those feelings, and so I developed a pretty strong insecurity about being too skinny or not being strong enough or whatnot. And so I pursued strength training as a way to remedy that. The motivation was wrong, but the pursuit of strength training eventually, um, you know, put me headfirst into that insecurity later on, where I was able to kind of tackle it. But initially, that was what motivated me. Now I have I tend to digest things intellectually. I When I like something, I get very obsessed, and so I fell in love with strength training, and I became utterly obsessed with it. Reading every book and magazine, and talking to people, just digesting as much information or gathering as much information as possible. I was even, I'd even go to the library and try and find old Soviet era studies on herbs and supplements, and I'd read
Love it.
books on chemistry to find out about which supplements would work the best. I mean, I obviously didn't know what I was doing, but I was just reading as much as possible, and I loved the pursuit. I really loved the pursuit. I felt a sense of control. I felt like this is something I could do to remedy this issue. Of course, there's no way to solve that issue unless you really tackle it head on, and I did that later on. But the pursuit of it really taught me a lot about discipline, and structure and work. And later on, I combined that with my real passion, which is people. I really like people. I come
Yeah.
from a big family. I love talking to people. I find people fascinating, and so I combined the two. And then I worked in the fitness industry. But that insecurity plagued me, and even to this day, it's still in the background. But it plagued me pretty strongly for at least the first half of my career in this fitness space. Luckily, I didn't project it onto my clients. I cared about my clients so much that I was able to do a decent job with them, much better than I did with myself.
It's first of all, I want to say what a gift. Obviously, at the time, you weren't probably recognizing it as a gift, but to be so bookish as you were
Mm.
as a young boy, and to have that be something that would edify you in the midst of your journey to fitness and so on and so forth. I mean that which might have been thought to be some sort of an awkward weakness, and I'm so much into books, and now just that insatiable hunger to learn and to read and to grow and so on has been such an incredible part of your success, or so it seems. I want to, and but the second thing I'll say is your ability to work with people who have not been familiar with the Mind Pump podcast, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. The engaging way with which you talk, even right now, or with other people, it just draws people into that space where they want to learn from you, they want to talk with you. You're a people person, and as you can tell, you have an enormous capacity for friendship, given all the time you spend with your guests and how generous you are, and so on. So I think it's marvelous. I want to circle back, Sal. So you said it so well, and this is my next question, and that is insecurity as a motivator.
Mhm.
You had said that while insecurity is powerful in getting most people exercising long term, and you just kind of alluded to this as well. Long term, you warned, it's not a very effective motivator because it gets us to do things that aren't necessarily the best for ourselves and our bodies. I think most people listening to this podcast probably recall, or maybe still are plagued with, the insecure aspects about how they look physically, who they are physically, and it serves as a needle around the time of New Year's resolutions, or the end of summers at the barbecue, or before summer comes on. They want to kind of get into shape and so on. They look at insecurity as being some sort of a bothersome gift, but you're saying no, that's not the case. It can get in the way. Could you kind of tell us more what you mean by that?
Yeah, no, so it is an initial powerful motivator, just to kind of illustrate, maybe you see a picture of yourself posted on social media, or you go to put on a pair of jeans or a pair of clothing that you haven't worn for a little while, and you notice it's all of a sudden real tight. So you have this just sense of, oh man, I'm, insert word, gross, fat,
Yeah.
inadequate, in my case, weak, skinny, whatever. And so that'll drive you to try and change that. But the problem is that the motivation comes from this kind of self hate and self disgust,
Hmm.
root. And when you do that, then the relationship you develop with exercise and diet is not a long term relationship in any way, shape, or form. Either what'll happen, there's two things that'll happen with that. One is you'll eventually stop. So you'll go to the gym, you'll beat yourself up, which, by the way, and I like to tell people about this so that if they experience it, they can identify it, or maybe they've already experienced this. Those initial hard workouts are cathartic because you are, in a sense, punishing yourself for, not being good enough, or being fat, or being unattractive, or weak, or skinny. So you go to the gym, you get started, you make yourself feel like you're going to throw up, or you crawl out of the gym and you feel like, yes, accomplished. It's almost like self-flagellation. It's
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
it's this cathartic.
Mortification. Yeah.
Yes. And so initially it feels good, but eventually what happens is you don't want to hate yourself anymore. I mean, even with
Mhm.
diet, for example, you don't think to yourself, I don't want that cookie. You think to yourself, I can't have that cookie, right? Because
Mhm.
I can't have it. I don't deserve it. I'm undisciplined. I eat terribly. I'm not a good person. So eventually you get sick of punishing yourself with your workouts, and you get sick of restricting yourself or tyrannizing yourself with diet. And so what happens, like any rebellion, is the pendulum swings very strongly in the opposite direction. So what you find is people will they'll start with this extremely strict diet, and then they'll go off, but they don't go off a little bit. It's like, these are the stories of people like, oh, I ate a whole cake, or ate,
Yeah.
7 slices of pizza. I ate past the point of feeling satisfied and made myself feel sick. Or you'll hear the following, I stopped working out because I just want to enjoy my life. I'll
Mhm.
never forget, I went to a dinner when years ago with with a family member's company, and this was a tech company, so I wasn't sitting with fitness people. These were just everyday people. And conversation starts flowing. What do you do for a living? Because everybody brought a friend or a spouse, and I said, oh, I'm a trainer. So people were asking me questions, and this woman sitting across from me said, I had a friend who was fanatical about exercise and eating right, and at 50, she got breast cancer and then died. And she said, and when that happened, I just said to myself, I'm just going to enjoy my life, and I'm not going to do any of that stuff. And that was the first time like an epiphany, it struck me. people the relationship that they're developing with exercise and diet is not one of self-care, but one
Yeah.
of self-punishment.
Good one.
Of course, you want to just enjoy your life if you go to the gym and you punish yourself, or of course you want to just enjoy your life if your diet is you tyrannizing yourself. Because the reality is this, and this is the truth, and I think when I say this, people will agree. There isn't a single aspect of your life that won't improve if you improve your health.
Yeah.
So the reality is enjoying your life is being healthier and more fit. But yet people have a completely different experience. Now, on the flip side, if you work out because you're trying to care for yourself, well, first off, the workouts are more appropriate, but also it's an
Mm.
act of self care. So you
Mm.
don't develop that relationship with it where it's a punishment. And then diet, again, it becomes nourishment. So you'll say either yes or no to the cookie, not because you're forced, but because you either want it or you don't. And you feel
Mm.
like you're taking care of yourself either by having the cookie because maybe you want to enjoy yourself a little bit, you're hanging out with your spouse, or you say, no, I know it's going to taste good, but I know what that does to me. It doesn't feel good. So I think I'm going to say no to that. It's a completely different approach. And it's the only sustainable one. By the way, on the other side, there is another route that the self hate model can lead to. The most common one is the one I just said, where you start, stop. Right? I work out
Yeah.
for 3
Yeah.
months and I fall off, or I go on the strict diet and I go way off. But then there's this other path that you'll see often in my space of the fitness professionals, where they turn it into such a dysfunction that they become fanatical, almost religious about
Mm.
their workouts and diet, to the point where they sacrifice relationships with people. They ignore the signs that their body tells them that they may be overtraining or training too hard, or what they're doing is not good for them. They ignore aches and pains and injuries, and they end up damaging themselves and hurting themselves. It becomes an abusive relationship. So really, in my experience, the only way to pursue this where it really does enrich your life, and also in a way that's sustainable, is to say to yourself, and you can be very honest, by the way, you can say, I haven't been taking care of myself. I'm 30 pounds overweight. This is the result of me not caring for myself like somebody that deserves to be cared for. I think I'm going to try I think I'm going to try taking care of myself. I think I'm going to try loving myself, as in the action,
Mm.
not the feeling. So what does that look like? And usually it's an appropriate approach. If you're not exercising now and you're deciding to start, and you go from the standpoint of I want to care for myself, well, that probably is a slow approach. You're probably not going to go from never going to the gym to going 6 days a week and coming out crippling sore. You're probably going
Right.
to say, all right, well, if I want to care for myself, I got to start slow, because otherwise it's too much. And you develop this much more sustainable approach. And the way I communicate this, by the way, Todd, is just, I trained people for over 2.5 decades, and the thing that I had to continue to revise and work on and revise and work on was how I communicated what I'm communicating,
Mm.
because I had to find a way to get people to adopt the correct and appropriate and right way of fitness and nutrition that could outcompete the advertisers and charlatans and fitness fanatics that dominate the fitness space, that communicate it in the wrong way. Like, how do I sell Mrs. Johnson that it's going to probably take a year to lose 30 pounds, and it's a slow
Yeah.
approach, and
Yeah.
when she's being told that she can lose 30 pounds in 30 days by taking this pill and by cutting out every food that starts with G or something weird like that. So it was it's been it's really trial and error, and so I was like, okay, how do I communicate this effectively so people can kind of understand and adopt it? That's what I try and do on the show.
You know what's so interesting, Sal, listening to this? So we're gonna in a segment or two, we're gonna talk about self-discipline, but a healthy self-discipline. In my practice of medicine, one of the things that I've learned over, 2 decades of doing this is reading the room. There's so much that comes with walking to the room. And yes, you've looked at the chart, and yes, you're familiar with this person from previous visits, but what's going on today in the room with this person? What's their mood like? How are they engaging with me? What's their eye contact like? What are they talking about? What are they not talking about? How are they different from previous, and so on? I'm just struck that I love the notion that we've had fitness endeavors and fitness strategies for diet strategies for eons and eons and eons. I mean, I mean, not yet, not that long, but for in the modern era for quite some time. And you're putting your finger on one of the seminal aspects that is the make or break issue, which is how does someone think about fitness? And if you think wrong about fitness as an instructor, and if you think wrong about fitness as a person trying to move in the right direction, you can have a colossal defeat or an incredible success. And it strikes me your study of this is so very important, and it says a lot to our listeners that maybe if you're struggling with weight or struggling with fitness and you grind through exercise, you hate to do it, you're punishing yourself and so on, something as simple as but as difficult as the proper mindset, the proper psychology around this, or the proper framing can make the difference between success and defeat. So I guess in that little soliloquy there, are you struck by the impact of psychology on all of this?
Yes, that's everything. Look, if you look at the data, just look at the data on weight loss. So we'll go with numbers. Uh, Close to 90% of everybody who loses weight gains it back within the first year or two. And I bet if we
Mhm.
stretch that out to 5 years, it gets like 95 plus percent. And millions of people lose weight every year.
Yeah.
So, and we're focusing on the wrong things. The thing that we need to focus on is our relationship that we develop with exercise and nutrition. So,
Mm.
to put it differently, we all know that if we want this to really benefit us, it's going to be something that we're going to have to do for the rest of our lives. Okay, that's
Mhm.
just a fact. Like you said this earlier, you quoted me. If you live the way you're supposed to live in modern life, then you will be. The high odds are you will be sick, fat, and unhealthy. We've created a world that is sedentary.
Yeah.
Markets are wonderful things, but the drawback to markets, or I would say, is really the drawback that all humans possess, which is they give us what we want, not necessarily what we need.
Right.
So markets have developed. I mean, really, what we've done is we've created a sedentary life. We've made food so hyper palatable that the palatability is more important than the nutritious aspect
Mm.
of it. Okay.
Yeah.
We've also made food extremely convenient. By the way, the palatability now that we've achieved with food has drug-like effects
Mm.
on the body. To give you a simple example, I stole this from Chris Kresser. If I gave you 5 plain boiled potatoes and I told you to eat them all in 30 minutes, you probably couldn't. You'd gag.
Yeah.
But if I gave you a large bag of Lay's potato chips, which contains about the same amount of potatoes, you'd probably be able to finish it. It's because it's
Mm.
called hyperpalatability. And the studies show that this contributes to 500 to 600 more calories consumed a day, just on average, just because it hijacks your brain. So
Mm.
markets
Mm.
have done this, right? You look at medicine. You work in medicine.
Yep.
When it comes to acute issues, Western medicine is exceptional. I mean, there's nothing better in the world. If you get
Right.
hurt, you have an emergency, you want Western medicine. Now it's
Yeah.
starting to catch up, but it doesn't do a very good job of looking at chronic or root cause type issues. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of reasons for that. People can point to the pharmaceutical industry, the way that insurance works, people themselves. Like you work with people. It's hard enough for you to probably get somebody to take a pill, twice a day,
Right.
let alone get someone to change their lifestyle, right? So
Right. Right.
so there's a lot of factors that go into this, but the point that I'm trying to make is that in the modern world, you're going to have to develop a relationship with exercise and diet because it's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
the most important factor that you need to look on is this relationship. How can I work this and train myself and develop a relationship in which I want to continue this forever, right? So it's not hard for somebody to eat healthy if they truly desire to eat healthy, if that's what they want to
Mhm.
do.
Right.
It's not hard for somebody to stay relatively active if that's something they really like and they enjoy and they value.
Right. Right.
So that's
Right.
the key. So you talk about the psychology, that's everything. If we were machines, this would be easy, right? I could just plug in the
Yeah. Yeah.
numbers and hand them over, but we're not. And so this is the big missing thing. This is what we're missing with how we communicate things. And my space, the fitness space, is terrible. It's absolutely terrible at this. It doesn't. It really it captures people in a hyper motivated self hate state of mind. You notice this most around January, right? People
Yep. Yep.
those New Year's resolutions. And oh my God, I feel so terrible or gross, and I overindulge, and so if the fitness space captures it, and then they press your insecurities by showing you before and after pictures and selling
Yeah. Yeah.
what the you know what the fitness industry does, and I'll tell you what, Todd. not to toot our own horn here at Mind Pump, 9 years in business, we have never once used a before and after to sell a product. Never.
Good one. Good one.
By the way, our marketing team, every marketing team we've ever worked with thinks we're crazy. And at least once a year, they sit us down to try and convince us why we need to use before and after. But it's like, look, we don't want to continue to push the wrong thing. We don't want to sell the side effect of a healthy lifestyle. A fit and healthy body, the way it looks, I should say, is actually the side effect of a healthy lifestyle. And that's what we're glorifying. To use another example, you mentioned diet. In fact, you were right the first time when you said humans have been working with diet for thousands of years.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's only in modern times that we've really tried to adopt diet to change how we look. That's a relatively modern thing.
Sure.
For most of human history, okay, diets, or should I say recorded history, diets have been, there's a specific type of diet that's present in every major world religion. Like fasting is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
But fasting was not used to lose weight.
Yeah.
People didn't fast because they needed to lose weight.
Right.
They fasted for spiritual growth. So we've twisted and distorted our relationship to food and activity to where the only value is how I look. And I'm going to tell you, that is a failed approach. It is a completely failed approach. Unfortunately, that's what we're being told is important. And that's what we think that's important, but it's not. It is not the way. It is not the way towards long-term success.
Segment 2, the fitness industry. On the Mind Pump website, Sal Di Stefano and his partners write, "The fitness world is filled with charlatans and snake oil salesmen pushing the latest and greatest and sometimes downright dangerous workout programs, supplements, and faux science on the unsuspecting masses." So, Sal, you're leading right into this segment. So we've discussed, some of your you did the early work as a personal trainer. You moved into the big box gyms before breaking out with Mind Pump and establishing your own wellness facility. But you found yourself, as you've already alluded to, you found yourself dismayed along the way. So my question is, in a world filled with people insecure about their looks and their physical fitness, how has the modern fitness industry at times served people well, but how has it at other times taken advantage of people?
I'll tell you who does a good job in the fitness industry are gym owners and fitness instructors and trainers for the most part. They are there because they truly want to help people. And a good trainer, a good coach, it has the best success potential with somebody who's looking to, to be able to change their lifestyle and behaviors in ways that improve their health. A good trainer or coach is an incredible guide. Those are the people that are doing it right. Now the wrong way, or I should say the bad, maybe not to pass judgment, but incorrect or inaccurate.
Yeah.
Is all the marketing that's trying to capture people in the state of mind that I described earlier. So you hate yourself. Okay, I look gross or whatever. Go online. Every advertiser now is trying to capture you. Here's a before and after. Here's how you can become more attractive. Here's how you can feel more valuable. And it's selling you something, a pill, a product, or I'll tell you what, the big box gym industry has actually gone down the wrong path, in which I'll tell you what, Todd, this was one of the beginnings of me leaving the big box gym business. I was in a meeting, and I'll never forget, we had these new investors that came into the company, and they were describing the most and the least profitable members that we had. And I right when they said it, I knew, we're going in the wrong direction.
Yep.
The least profitable members were the ones that used the gym 3 or more days a week. The people that showed up because they used the equipment, they wore it down, they pay their dues, they don't buy supplements, they don't buy products, they just show up and work out. The most profitable members, you want to guess which ones they were?
They're the donors. They're the ones that give the money and never show up.
The ones that never show up. Now, keep in mind, in 1997, when I started in the big box gym, this is 24-Hour Fitness, here in San Jose.
Yeah.
An all-club membership, I remember the price. All club meaning you had access to, at the time, 117 locations, I think it was. This was $1997, so I'm not even controlling for inflation, okay?
Yeah.
It was $349 to join, $49 processing fee, $45 a month. That today is considered extremely expensive for that type of a membership. So what's happened is that they've chased after these profitable members, And we now have these big box gyms that, here's the model: charge so little that the person doesn't want to cancel, but they don't show up either.
Yeah.
And so this is what they serve now. So that's, one example. And again, like I said, the marketers that are putting out the wrong equipment, and big money makers in the fitness industry are things like supplements. So
Hmm.
a lot of the information that's out there is geared towards supplements,
Yeah.
and so it's distorting the consumer's view of what actually makes a difference. So
Yeah.
if I were to create a pie chart for you of what makes the biggest difference in your fitness and health and even body fat percentage, muscle, and all that other stuff, diet, exercise, and lifestyle, which includes like sleep and relationships with others and those types of things, would make up about 99.5%. 0.5% would be supplements. But the consumer has this distorted idea that supplements are a much bigger part of the pie because so much information is geared towards selling these things. So you'll see articles
Yeah.
that say things like new compound, doubles fat oxidation or whatever, and they'll use misleading titles. But if you look at the
Yeah.
study, you see it's like a 1% difference or something. Doesn't make a difference. So yeah, that's what we're trying to battle, and I'm trying to I'm trying to create an entertaining podcast that sells the right stuff better, and trying to prove the model. We're trying to prove the model so other people in the space say, okay, you can do it this way.
I got to be honest with you. When I first encountered, when I was like, okay, I'm going to go kind of do some deep dive and listening to Mind Pump and so on, I thought I was entering the sort of the care, not that you guys were caricature, but my imagination was you guys were very charismatic, true, have done deep dives on fitness and were kind of disseminating that, true. Um, but I also thought it was going to be really supplement heavy. And I was so positively heartened as a doc too, because I'm gonna tell you, there's patients that come in and they refuse my blood pressure medication or my statin, but they will have 8 supplements.
Yeah,
That I say to them, look, I'm not saying all supplements are wrong, but I'm telling you the biggest concern is the regulation that's lacking, the evidence that's lacking, the
yeah,
expense that's unnecessary, the side effects that are unclaimed, the outcomes that are unjustified, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I'm getting on listening to Mind Pump, I'm like, these guys are speaking. I mean, they're preaching the truth. Where you're coming back to the notion of diet, exercise, lifestyle, but also on top of that, the psychological. I mean, and you've got results, but the psychological approach to this. I mean, it's amazing because it's sort of I hate to say this, but it's sort of like what's old is new. This is an older concept. Even before it was actually probably articulated, so it's new enough that you guys are putting your stamp on it. But I'm like, you're rinsing a lot of the narrative around fitness and a lot of the falsehoods around fitness. You're rinsing them from what's many people have swallowed. I got to spend tons of money on all these powders and supplements and so on and so forth. Not to say there aren't a narrow window of this or that might be justified or new evidence or what have you, but I think at the end of the day, it's so refreshing, and I just think that that's where a lot of people are saying, wait a second, if I eat right and not punish myself, if I exercise and like doing it, if I take a positive spin on this and I get good sleep and so on and so forth, I can do this for the rest of my life and have results. That is a contrary narrative to my way of thinking, to the fitness industry that's out
yes,
there. That is that fair to say?
yes. Dr. Todd, let me I'll narrow it down for supplements for people if people are really wondering. Okay,
Yeah,
so
please.
here's the deal. Here are your rankings of supplements. Okay, number one are supplements that can fill a nutrient deficiency if you have a nutrient deficiency. That's a game changer. So if I go to
Yep.
you and you test you run some blood tests, you're like, wow, your vitamin D is
Right.
really low. And I supplement with vitamin D, game changer, right? So nutrient deficiency is a big deal. Supplementing
Yeah.
with essential nutrients can be a game changer. Now, going through food, probably better. Not
Right.
always successful, depending on the person's diet or absorption or whatever. We don't have to go down that route, but to fill a nutrient deficiency, game changer. That's number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's number two. Okay, um, creatine. Creatine has thousands and thousands and thousands, literally thousands of studies that show its efficacy. It's good for brain health, organ health. It helps you with strength, performance, energy, cognitive function. Okay, all that being said, creatine will give you about 2% of an increase in your in your performance.
Yeah.
And creatine is literally plain old creatine monohydrate is in a class of its own compared to every other supplement that exists.
Hmm.
All the other stuff is there value? Okay. Okay, let me give you an example. There's value to the spoiler on my car, but
Yeah.
but not if I don't have an engine.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I don't have an engine, the spoiler's not going to do anything. To you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you know, that's the point that I'm trying to make. So, but the problem is all the information is geared around supplements because that's what makes money. So when
Yeah.
you put out your blogs and information, so people have this kind of distorted view of what's important. But look, I'll tell you, if I get a client who comes in and they say to me, "Man, my energy is low. I'm not feeling very healthy. I need more strength and just not feeling very good. I'm not exercising right now. My diet, I really don't watch what I eat." And if I say to them and I look at them and I let's say I ask them a questionnaire and I say, "Okay, well, let's make this one change right here. It looks like you go to bed and wake up at different times. Like it looks like Friday night you stay up late, wake up late Saturday, do the same thing on Sunday, then Monday comes around, you got to wake up early. Let's go to bed and wake up at the same time every day so we're not jet lagged
Hmm.
on Monday."
Yeah.
That
Good one.
one thing right there, just give you an example.
Yeah.
Huge, all of a sudden people are like, "Oh my gosh, Sal, like I feel so much better." And then I'd move to like
Hmm.
step number 2, which would be let's look at your diet. Okay, let's not change anything, but I'd like for you to prioritize protein. Eat that first in your meals and
Yeah.
see how you feel. And typically people come back and go, "Whoa, I feel a lot better. I'm not as hungry." And like these things make so
Yeah.
much of a bigger impact
Yeah.
than 15 supplements combined.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our podcast would not be possible selling that or talking about that if it wasn't for new media, because this is why we started the podcast. If we went back to, if we just went back a generation, Mind Pump wouldn't exist because there isn't a single publication that would have put us out there with that
Right.
information
Right.
because they were all funded
Right.
by supplement companies. But luckily, we started a podcast. We didn't need much. We could fund it ourselves and put it up on the air, and so we could tell the truth.
It's funny, you're rebels. You're
Yeah,
rebels by giving people common sense
yeah,
advice. I mean, and it's uncommon. I mean, it's common sense, but it's uncommon in the sense that it runs afoul. I mean, and mind you, again, William Osler. I'm going to reference him in a little bit, but William Osler was this great, the godfather of internal medicine. He put Johns Hopkins on the map, and he was alive, kind of late 1800s, early 1900s. But he called out the meager and disappointing therapies that were being promoted again and again and again. And he said he wrote this textbook that was printed 16 different editions, and he based it with hundreds of thousands of offerings, and it was based on his frank common sense and his experience and good medical practice. And he said, my commentary on therapeutics here is largely lacking. I hasten to say my number one effort is to basically decrease over drugging. And
oh,
and 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 to your point of what you're saying within the fitness industry, you're telling people. I think a lot of people want the quick fix, and they also, we've all kind of bought in. I mean, many people not medically trained, but bought into the notion that if I can do it, a pill can do it better. So
yeah,
therefore, I'm going to get on this pill. And for you to come back and say, "Look, I'm not going to be draconian in my approach to you by saying, you've got to work out like crazy, you've got to diet like
no,
crazy, all this stuff." But you take it step by step, and yet you say the supplements. There's this very narrow window of role. Here's the stuff that isn't super expensive. It's hard at times, but we take it step by step and work for the long haul. We're going to achieve what we want to achieve. And I just tell you, Sal, from an internal medicine practice standpoint, what you're doing, the common sense approach is so heartening because it's healthier and it's more sustainable. And I'm not expert in the fitness aspects like you are by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying your work translates well into medicine because it isn't full of pseudoscience and full
right.
of extra supplements and all these things that science can do for you. Actually, it's a little easier than that, and that's why it's so hard. Is that a
Yes, let me just put the cherry on top, okay? Just so I don't sell the wrong message.
yeah,
You don't start slow because you can't quote unquote handle going harder. Because here's what will happen: somebody listening to this goes, "Oh, that's a nice message, but I'm so motivated." By the way, just a little side note on motivation: if you fall in love with motivation, you will let yourself down because that feeling goes away. Okay, so if you're like, "Oh, I'm so motivated, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z," always put yourself in the context of, is this something I'll be able to maintain when the feeling of motivation goes away? If
Totally.
it's not, then I'm not going to start there. But besides that, the way that the body adapts to exercise, it's a stress adaptation. Okay, so exercise is a stress on the body, and what the body does is it's a hormetic effect. The body essentially aims to first recover from the stressor and then adapt so that next time that same insult does not produce the same stress. So, to give a different example, imagine if I lived in my mom's basement for 3 years and then I went outside into the sun. It wouldn't take very much sunlight to induce a tan, right? To induce the skin darkening
Hmm.
response adaptation to the sun. But if I stayed outside for too long, which in that case wouldn't be much because I lived in my mom's basement for 3 years, right? So, like somebody who hasn't exercised for a while,
Yeah.
I would get a sunburn. That's not going to give me a tan faster. If anything, that's going to make
Yeah.
it happen much slower. So the approach to exercise needs to be the right dose. In fact, now to give an analogy with medicine, when it comes to prescribing medications, there's always a right dose. Too little, not going to be efficacious. Too much, and we can have disastrous consequences. With exercise, the right dose will get you there the fastest.
Hmm.
More, all more is going to do, it's not going to get you there faster. And I mean more in terms of more time, more intensity, harder, whatever. More, all that's going to do is compromise your body's ability to adapt. And all it's going to do is tell your body, we need to recover, we need to heal. And so what ends up happening is you get sore, the soreness goes away, you go back to the gym, you get sore, the soreness, but you don't progress. And why am I not progressing? I'm beating myself up because all
Yeah.
your body can do is heal at this point. In fact, if you push it
Mm.
too hard, you'll even compromise your body's ability to heal, and we'll start to see really negative stress effects, which I run into all the time. So now the question is, what's the right dose? Well, where you're currently at will determine that. So
Yeah.
if I do no exercise at all, and I might take 3,000 steps a day, I work a desk job. So I wake up in the morning and, I get my kids ready for school, drive them to school, drive to my office, sit at my desk. Then I, get in my car, drive home, pick up the kids, come home, we eat dinner, sit down, watch TV a little bit, whatever. And that's my activity. Do you know how much it's going to take to induce some adaptations? Not much. I
Yeah.
could literally do a few sets of body weight squats at moderate intensity, which is more than I do anyway, and that will induce some adaptations. Now, at some point, if you keep doing this for years and years and years, and you want to keep taking yourself to the next level, yeah, your intensity could get quite high, and you could train quite
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
But by the way, the data now is clear on this. It You don't need a lot just to have a quality of life that reflects a fit and healthy body. Now, you want to look like you want to look like a billboard, you want to have a six pack, you want to have that kind of a body. That takes years, and that takes
Hmm.
scaling up that time. But most people really don't want that. Most people they're like, look, I just want to be fit and healthy. I want to be mobile. I
Yeah.
want to be relatively lean. I want to feel good. Um, I'm going to tell you right now, with years and years and years of training, you can accomplish that with about 2 days a week, maybe three.
Mm. Mm.
You don't need more than that. So the average person, it takes very little to get the body to start to progress. And any more than that won't get you there any faster. And I have to say that because I know there's people listening that are like, okay, great message. Doesn't apply to me. I want to get there faster.
Yeah.
I'm going to make this happen. You won't make it happen faster. In fact, you're gonna throw a wrench into the machine and slow things down. So that's just how the body works. It's not, and then of course on top of that, it develops sustainability and a better relationship with it all. So it's better all the way around, even from a result standpoint.
Again, this is amazing because in the sense of you're rooted in the science of this, you're rooted in the sense of longevity, and sustainability. And again, Sal, it's funny. I'm a big fan of, again, I teach medical students and residents. One of the things I say to them is, you need to be as much of a student of human nature as you are of the human body
Yeah,
when you're working with patients. And so I'm oftentimes I'm mixing in. We're talking about diabetes management or heart failure management or pneumonias or whatever the case may be. I'm also having them read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, because these people have written some of the greatest reflections on the nuance of what it means to be human, and how to discern the slowest movement this way in consciousness or that way in consciousness. And I'm not trying to get too deep into the philosophical backdrops of the way people think and so on. But the bottom line is, again, psychology and personal philosophy fits heavily into medical decisions people make for themselves. And what's, again, very heartening about what you're doing is you're research based. you're experience based, but you're unbelievably attentive to the notion of human nature. Like you said, a person who comes in hot is going to maybe burn out fast.
Yeah.
And what you're not trying to do is trying to rain on their parade. You're trying to say, look, I'm in it to win it with you. But if you want to be in for the long haul, here's the way you go. And slow and steady wins the race, and we'll ramp it up accordingly. And it's going to be nuanced to you. It's not going to be a one size fits all kind of an approach. So that is again an attentiveness, not just to the human body. That's an attentiveness to human nature and human psychology, which is a much more complex way of approaching fitness. And many people don't even, they, like you said, they give that stuff lip service, and it's all about how many reps, how heavy, how many
No.
sets, how often,
No, no, no. Look, like I said, and this is why I love trainers so much who stick with it, make this a career. They really care about people. I really wanted to see people succeed, and God, it was a good 7 years into my career where I looked at what I was doing, and I was like, this isn't working. Yeah, people are getting fit and in shape when they're with me, but then they stop, and
Yeah.
and the statistics, they're falling right in line with the statistics. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Why can't I get people to do this forever? And I used to think it was, oh, these people, they lack discipline and all this other stuff, and they're not, but the truth is, and then I looked at them like, oh my God, these are doctors and lawyers and
Yeah.
executives. Like, obviously, these are not undisciplined individuals. There's something wrong here, and it's my approach, and I got to figure this out. And it's all about, look, I'll give you a silly example. Okay.
Mm.
I bet you do the same thing. Attaching a habit to a habit that you already do is one easy way of sticking to it. For example, if you tell someone to take a medication with breakfast, they're more likely to take it daily than if you were to tell them to take it at 10:15 or some weird timers, right?
Right. Right.
So here's an example. If I want to get somebody to walk 30 minutes a day, okay,
Mhm.
I could do this two ways. I could say, hey, carve out 30 minutes a day and go on a walk. Or I could
Yeah.
say, after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, walk for 10 minutes.
Mm.
Guess which one is much more likely to be successful in terms of sustainability and consistency, right? Here's another
Yeah.
example. People, human nature, we don't like to take things away or be told we can't do something, but adding things is a little easier to swallow. So, give an example.
Mhm.
I could tell somebody um, to eat less calories. I could say, hey, cut your calories by 300 calories a day.
Mhm.
Or I could say, let's aim for your target body weight in grams of protein, and I want you to eat that first.
Mm.
Now, what? So, in other words, don't change anything else. Just eat this first, and then eat whatever else you want to eat afterwards.
Yeah.
Now, I
Yeah.
know, and the data shows this quite quite consistently, is that eating protein or chasing that target protein makes you eat less. It's very satiety producing. Typically, results in about 300 calories less consumed a day. Right? Here's another one. I could say, let's cut your calories down by 15%.
Mhm.
Or I could say, don't change your diet, but when you eat, let's not be on your phone, let's not watch TV, not be on your computer, just be with your food.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the data shows that you eat about 10, 15% less calories when you do that. So these are just things I figured out
Yeah.
that make behavior changes more likely and more
Yeah.
effective. The other thing too is what we're dealing with here is it's not trivial. You'll hear people in my space say, and this really annoys me when I hear this. Food is fuel. Food is fuel. Just look at it like fuel. Like, yeah, if you if you're an orthorexic, yeah, sure, you have an eating disorder in that direction, okay. But that's not true. Yeah, food is fuel.
Yeah.
That's true. But what
Yeah.
else is food? Celebration, it's mourning, it's connection, it's
Yeah.
cravings, it's it could be happiness, depression, anxiety. So we can't look at food and say calories, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. That's not all. That's like one sliver of what
Right.
food is. We have to really talk about food, our relationship to it. And now, how do I get somebody to enjoy eating something healthy
Mm.
when it's not nearly as palatable as that thing that's unhealthy? Well, here's how. Let's start by identifying and connecting to all of the values that food provides for us, which we don't do
Mm.
very well.
Mm.
We are
Right.
conditioned to really assign one value to food. How hedonistically palatable is it?
Yeah.
In fact, we're so disconnected from food that, and I would get this all the time. I'd get clients that would, I'd go through and ask them questions, and I'd say, "Oh, it looks like at 2 o'clock every day you take Rolaids." Yeah, I get heartburn. It's just something that I get all the time. And then we end up identifying it's that turkey sandwich or whatever you eat every day at lunch. And they go, oh my God, I had no idea. And the reason why they had no idea is, there's this video you can watch on YouTube. I'm going to give it away, so it won't be effective now for people, but hopefully they're already familiar. There's a video where you have a group of 10 people passing a basketball around, and the instruction is to count how many times the basketball is being passed around. And at the end of it, to see how close you are to the accurate number. At the end of the video, the instructor comes on and says, okay, did you count how many times the ball was passed? And you say, yes. And he says, did you see the gorilla walk through the crowd? And you're like, what? And then they rewind the video, and there's a person in a gorilla suit that literally walks through the people passing the ball that you don't even perceive because all you're looking at is the ball being passed.
Right.
So what we're doing is all we're looking at is the palatability of food. When your friends and you decide what you're having for lunch, what do you consider? Like, oh, what do you feel like? Oh, I feel like Mexican. What do you feel like? It's all about palatability, which is a value. I don't want to take away from that. There is a value to food, which is to enjoy it. But there's also other values that we're not connecting. How do I feel before, during, after? How's it affecting my sleep, my skin, my energy, my exercise performance? How is it affecting all these other things? And once you connect to those, here's what ends up happening naturally. You start to develop a value system around your food that's now based off of more accurate or should I say complete information. So then what ends up happening is your friends want to go out for pizza, and you can, within yourself, you go, oh yeah, I know that tastes good, but I also have identified that when I eat pizza, I feel so groggy about 2 hours later. And I really don't want to feel like that later. So I think I'm going to pass. Or you may say, I know I feel groggy later, but I haven't hung out with my friends in a long time and haven't eaten pizza for a while. So it's a worthwhile trade. So let's go have that. You end up developing a more complete picture.
Yep.
Yes. And you actually start to find that you'll crave foods differently for different values.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's a great point. By the way, that's a great point because, like you said, and maybe I'm going to go out and have one piece. Usually, I eat 4, or I'm going to have one piece and maybe get a bowl of a salad. I love that notion of saying there's multiple facets that go into the decision. Not let's just go eat, drink, and have a good time because it's so palatable and enjoyable. You're saying let's just be for a few minutes. Let's be a little bit more nuanced, and all of a sudden you're identifying control, but control not just because I don't want to eat like a pig and gain weight, but because of all these other variables that you hadn't taken into consideration that you've just kind of pointed out to them.
Yes, 100%. And this is a process. We're not used to really connecting to these things. In fact, we're really used to ignoring the signs that our body tells us. Yeah. We stimulate ourselves with caffeine to wake up, or we bring ourselves down with alcohol or whatever. But when you start to connect to these things, you start to become aware of them.
Yeah.
Then what happens is you'll find very naturally that you'll start to want to make different choices. And you'll have a different relationship with food where, you'll notice like, oh, my digestion's off. Oh yeah, when I eat these foods, it really helps. That's what I want to eat. Or, tomorrow I'm going to go on a big hike, and there's these types of foods that I notice that when I eat them the day before, they really improve my athletic performance. That's what I want to eat right now. It just develops it's a more complete picture. Yeah. Otherwise, we are going to be left to the whims of palatability, which is where we're at, where think about it, right? Like the average person, most people, their health isn't ideal, metabolically unhealthy. A large minority are just downright not doing well at all. If you look at the data, and really, if we step back and you think like, how is this happening? Like, don't people feel terrible? Don't they realize what it's doing to their bodies and their health and their mental state? And I don't think that people truly fully comprehend. I think maybe intellectually, but they're not allowing themselves to feel these things. If you start to change this process, and it is a process, then I promise you at the end of this is where you'll want to do these things that right now you're white knuckling to get the body that you want. You'll start to want to do these things. And again, this took me years to figure out, but then it became very successful. Now, I didn't turn everyday people into fitness fanatics. I think you have to have a certain level of obsession in order to do that. Not everybody's going to want to work in a gym.
Yeah.
But I got everyday people to exercise consistently 2-3 days a week. and to eat in ways that gave them generally fit and healthy, bodies and minds. And this is the approach.
Hi, I'm Todd Warner, Managing Editor of Evangelization and Culture, the journal of the Word on Fire Institute. Word on Fire is a global evangelical community that exists to provide our members with the resources they need to proclaim Christ to a secular culture. Our award-winning quarterly journal, Evangelization and Culture, is offered exclusively to Word on Fire Institute members. It's a tangible representation of our mission and goal to lead with beauty in order to bring others to the knowledge of truth. Inside each issue, you'll find writing from premier scholars and inspiring pieces on literature, culture, and daily life from fellow missionaries on the journey to know and serve Christ. Get a copy of the current issue of the Evangelization and Culture Journal for free by visiting wordonfire.org/journal. Thank you, and join us in bringing Christ to a hungry culture. Segment 3, Self-Discipline. After reading Plutarch's Lives about the leaders of Greece and Rome, President Harry S. Truman said, "In reading the lives of great men, I found that the first victory they won was over themselves. Self-discipline with all of them came first." And for some reason, when I was a ninth grader going through some challenges, I remember my English teacher giving me a small key with an engraved message that I'll never forget, saying, "The key to success is self-discipline."
Mm.
Sal, is that true? And I want to frame that up on the heels of our conversation that we just had. There's the uh, reining in the person that is hyper obsessed at the front end. They are going to race to the moon, and having to talk them down and say, let's slow things down a little bit, and let's be measured, and let's play the long game here. What would you say about the way in which sometimes we can be a little bit too indulgent of
Yeah.
ourselves? We live in a little bit of a therapeutic age. So I guess in sum, how well does the message of self-discipline and sacrifice, delayed gratification, hard work, how well does that go over in our therapeutic age? And how do you find your sweet spot between the obsessive who's going to burn out and the lazy who's never going to start?
Well, they both require discipline.
Yeah.
Discipline is more important. I mean, it's so important today. Look, I remember, I remember years ago. So my parents are both were both poor Sicilian immigrants. So I'm
Mm,
first generation American. My grandfather, so my dad's, he really grew up hard and poor. I mean, he grew up in a house with 7 siblings. It was like one cement room with the donkey in the family. Like they didn't always have food. Like they were really poor. So I remember, I must have been 17 or 18. My dad flew my grandfather out here to America, and it was really the first time he'd ever left Sicily, let
mm,
alone Europe or anything else. He comes here. I mean, I remember him seeing the freeways and he was just like, oh my gosh. Anyway, he saw me working out in the backyard, and I was lifting weights, and he came out and he was laughing. And I said, "What's so funny?" And he says, "You're picking heavy things up and putting them down, and you're not doing anything. You're not working." He goes, "The way I used to do that is I used to work, and it was funny to him because what a strange concept. I'm
yeah.
going and I'm training my body just so that it stays healthy. I'm not building anything. I'm not like actually working physically like he did. But the truth is, discipline is very important today because everything we can have anything that we want, but we need to really realize what we need. And what we need is we need some struggle. Our bodies need some physical challenge. We need discipline around food because, thousands of years ago, people weren't overweight because you couldn't get enough food to become overweight. Maybe
Yeah.
kings and queens, had that luxury, but even kings and queens didn't have access to what the average person has access to in a grocery store now, right?
Right.
Any whim, like I could satisfy any whim with the snap of a finger. I mean, I can go on Amazon right now and order something and it'll be at my house tonight.
Yeah.
So discipline is extremely important. All right. So I think people agree with that. So the question is, well, okay, well, how do I develop that? What is that? It's a skill. It's a skill like anything else. You've probably developed a skill of discipline in other areas of your life. You just haven't really developed it maybe in this area of your life. So how do you develop the skill of discipline specifically? Here's what you do. You take one step that is challenging. It has to be challenging, otherwise it has no meaning. This is important. Meaning comes from struggle and challenge, or at least that's
Mm-hmm,
part of the
mm-hmm,
formula. So
mm-hmm.
one step that is challenging, yet realistic in the context of forever for me. So in other words, okay, I heard Sal talk on this podcast. I'm ready to improve my health and fitness. I want to take a step forward. What does that look like for me? Let me think about this. Okay, I'm not going to the gym at all now. I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. Okay, well, now let's put this in the context of forever for me. Is
Hmm.
that realistic? When I'm not motivated, when I'm tired, when, work is stressful? No, I don't think that's realistic at all right now. So let me start over. All right, what's realistic for me forever, but that's also challenging. No matter what you pick, it's that's the right answer. So I don't care what it is. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
once I had a client when it came to diet, we had a lot of challenges. And where we settled for her was to read a paragraph out of a book of nutrition every other day. That's where we started. So
Hmm.
we didn't even make any dietary changes. It was just to inform ourselves. And then little by little, that led to drinking an extra glass of water,
Hmm.
tasting a piece of broccoli. Eventually, we were able to step forward. So one step that is challenging yet realistic in the context forever. And then here's what's going to happen. You'll do that one thing. And if you picked right, you'll be able to stay with it consistently. And
Yeah.
then it's going to become a habit. It's going to feel like, yeah, this is a part of my day now. This is what I do. Maybe it was walking for 10 minutes a day or something like that, right? Then you ask yourself again, what's the next step that I can take that is challenging yet realistic forever?
Hmm.
And then you take that step. Now, here's what you'll experience by doing this. The time and the space in between each step will start to shorten as you continue down this process. In other words, you'll take a step maybe the first time and it feels like a habit 3 months later, and then you take
Yeah.
another step. And then the next step might happen a month later. You
Yeah.
start to develop this skill of discipline. And little by little, like any skill, you get better and better at it
Yeah.
to where you get to a point where now you're doing something that is really beneficial. You're seeing huge benefits from it. You feel great. And it doesn't feel like, again, like you're white knuckling through the whole process. That's the step-by-step approach. And it is a
Yeah.
snowball effect. So just to give people a little bit of, excitement around this, it does feel like it starts off slow. That's perfectly
Hmm.
fine.
Hmm.
But over time, you get the snowball effect where you start to take bigger steps and the space in between the steps starts to get shorter and shorter and shorter. I'll tell a story to kind of explain this a little bit. And this is later on when I figured out really how to be effective with clients. So towards the end of my career, I had quite a few clients that were medical practitioners and doctors. I had a studio down the street from Good Samaritan Hospital here up in the Bay Area next to Los Gatos in the San Jose area. And after they trained with me for a while, they would start to refer their patients to me. So it was this great relationship. I had one doctor. I remember she called me. She said, "Hey, I'm going to send someone over who really does not want to work out, really does not want to do any of this. I hope you can help her." No problem. So in walks in this young lady. The first words out of her mouth were, "I'm working out once a week with you. I'm not doing anything else on my own, and I'm not changing or talking about my diet." So my response to that was, "Okay, perfect. That's where we're going to start." Now, if she had approached me years earlier in my career, I would have, used my skills of convincing, and I would have tried to motivate her and inspire her, and we would have totally failed. Maybe I would have convinced her to do more, or I would have blown her out. Nonetheless, it would have been a total fail. But this time I said, "No problem. That's all we're going to do." I remember the look on her face was of surprise. She thought I
Yeah.
would try to tell her that that was a waste of time or something. No, we'll do that. Well, anyway, a year into that, and she's feeling good. She's noticing, like, wow, I feel strong. This is great. A year into it, she came to me and she said, "Sal, is there anything I can do on my own at home? Can you give me like 2 or 3 exercises?" Absolutely. I gave her 2 or 3 exercises. 6 months later, "Sal, I'd like to reduce my sugar intake. What do you think about that?" "Sure, let's start there." Anyway, 4 years later,
Hmm.
I mean, this was totally a part of her life. She was working
Yeah.
out twice a week with me. She was doing stuff on her own. Her diet had transformed. She actually had gone out and got herself educated in fitness just for herself.
Yeah.
But that was the approach.
Yeah.
Now, had I told her 1 day a week is not enough, you got to do more, you're wasting your time type of deal, or had she thought that herself, she would have never got to the point where, she is now to this day. We're talking, I don't know, 12 years later, she's still exercising.
It's amazing. It's amazing. By the way, I'll tell you the story of smoking cessation in medicine really quickly. There's a doctor I knew. So we'd have these metrics that were measured on with your diabetes, your A1Cs, and are you on are you on an ACE inhibitor if you have protein in your urine, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these metrics for various maladies that the powers that be are trying to, in good faith, not always correct, but in good faith, trying to get us to be kind of really good at our numbers. And that's a whole nother show, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
But anyway, one of them was smoking cessation. Now we're always encouraging our patients and really trying to give them alternatives, but talk to them about quitting smoking, quitting smoking, quitting smoking. So there's this partner, not in my clinic, but in a different clinic, who basically had a perfect score with smoking cessation. Got every one of her patients were identified as who were former smokers were non-smokers, and it was like amazing. How you doing it? How you doing it? Well, the answer is she made them so mad at her, they fired her. And so they left the clinic. And so her stats got better. And my point is, you didn't make any dent whatsoever in that person's health. You made them hate you, leave the clinic and go somewhere else and probably keep smoking and basically double
right.
down on smoking and so on. And my point is that again, we want to get everybody to quit smoking. There's no question, but sometimes there are victories when a patient who's got a lot of problems and a lot of things going on and social issues, et cetera, and they're smoking a pack a day and you've encouraged them to quit smoking and you see them 2 months later and they say, I'm down to 3/4 of a pack. That is a celebration.
Yes.
I mean, in a perfect world, they'd be not smoking. But my point is and not to you quote the baby steps notion, but it's unbelievable when you start to foster victories where others are seeing only defeats and you're fostering trust where everybody is sowing distrust and ire and antagonism. The success in the long haul, which is what you're talking about with this patient you're mentioning, it's amazing what you can do in the long haul.
Yeah, well, the irony is, the reason why people self-medicate with food or cigarettes or alcohol or drugs or food. I use, food is one of the biggest, one of the most challenging substances that's abused is food, right?
Yeah.
Um, one of the main reasons why people self-medicate with food is because they just don't feel good. And in the moment, it feels good to distract yourself with something that's hyper palatable.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is make this person feel terrible about themselves,
Yeah.
that they can't be perfect. Like, I'm gonna fuel the very thing that they're trying to get away from, and they're gonna reach for the very thing that they're, medicating with. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting, Todd, on this. Look at the data on bariatric patients. If they're not carefully worked with and monitored, and if they don't work with a therapist and they don't have good
Yep.
guidance, they'll they'll medically make it impossible for themselves to overeat. And what they'll typically do is reach for other ways of
Yep.
self-medicating. So you'll see the rate of drug abuse and other types of self-medication skyrocket because we never were really solving, the root issue, which is,
Yeah.
why were you eating so much in the first place? So I don't care about short-term fleeting, pounds on the scale. I'm trying to help people in a permanent way. That's not helping anybody. In fact, the data will also show this. The more times you lose weight and gain it back, the less likely you are to be successful the next time around, to the point where you completely give up at some point. And I don't want people to completely give up. I want to help them figure this out.
To your point, and if I can say this happens again, and I'm talking to medical students, residents about this, the number one thing I say, the number one difference you can make with your patient is to start by giving a damn about them. And
Yeah,
when you walk in the room and you give a damn about that person, the lens of everything you do for them and the way you treat them and then how they respond to you changes fundamentally.
totally.
And to your point, again, I'm not trying to make it sound I'm not trying to make this clinical about reading human nature and understanding human psychology. It comes with the notion of caring enough about somebody you're working with to know where they're coming from, where they want to go, and how you can work with them in a positive way to achieve those ends. And that's, I mean, that's literally accompaniment.
Yes.
It's accompaniment, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most important things I used to teach trainers and coaches was to meet their clients where they're at. Meet them where they're at. If you're guiding somebody on this journey, you got to start the journey where they're standing.
Yeah.
And that's just the only way this is going to work. And also, have some. You can be honest and have empathy. my clients, I was always very honest with my clients. Sal, why am I not getting results? Well, John, you're having a tough time with the nutrition. We're not doing the things that could produce those types of results. However, here's a few things that we are noticing that we're moving in the right direction. And I think we're going to get there, type of deal. Like the empathy, and I say this to trainers and coaches or even just fitness fanatics, like, like look at yourself. You might have mastered this one part of your life, but there's areas where you struggle that other people might think is so simple.
Yeah.
So this is a challenge. This is not easy. And again, we do not live in a world that fosters good health at all.
Mm, mm,
You have to literally make time to be active. It's not going to be natural. You have to literally navigate through a sea of food that is designed, almost all of it, even health foods. Okay, the top selling health foods are the most palatable ones.
mm.
They're all completely designed and engineered, and there's a lot of engineering that goes into them
Yeah.
to satisfy your hedonistic whims, not to nourish your body, improve your health, your fitness, that kind of stuff. So it's a tough world to navigate. So it's a challenge. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be a slow approach. You're not going to take
Mm.
somebody who doesn't learn how to play the piano into playing the symphony overnight. You got to learn, one step at a time, and take your time with it. Meet them where they're at, and you will be successful. You will. I've done it time and time again. If you approach it hating yourself, if you approach it with this, I'm hyped and motivated, so I'm going to do everything I can right now, make it happen as fast as possible to make myself get out of this uncomfortable body as quickly as possible. You're going to fail, and it's going to be worse. But look, the right way to do this feels good. It really does. One of the things you could do, I'll tell you what, take your scale and put it in the closet. Stop weighing yourself. I love telling people that because, I used to see this all the time, Todd. They'd get stronger, they'd feel better, more energy. Then they'd get on the scale, it would only go down a pound, and their whole mood would shift.
Yep.
And I'm like, I could cut your leg off, and you'd lose 15 pounds. So it's literally like get rid of the things that are getting in your way. The scale tends to do that. Social media tends to do that. Comparing yourself unfairly tends to do that. And again, it's an approach that works.
Segment 4, Mind Pump and the Search for Truth. According to Sal Di Stefano's bio on the Mind Pump website, the goal with Mind Pump was simple: bring quality fitness and health information to the masses with integrity and honesty. Sal wanted to shift the direction of the fitness industry from an aesthetic, insecurity-based industry to a self-love and self-care health industry. He knew this could be accomplished with education through entertainment. So, Sal, after 10 years of running your own studio, you worked with a client named, I think, Doug Eggy,
Yeah.
who would become your producer for Mind Pump. And soon you met Adam Schaefer, Justin Andrews, who've become your co-hosts on your podcast, Mind Pump. Just tell us a little bit about the origin of this endeavor. How did you go from I'm doing my own studio, working with clients, so on and so forth, to this internationally renowned health and fitness podcast and enterprise?
Yeah, so Doug hired me. He was referred to me by a chiropractor for back pain, but he had an extensive background in exercise and fitness. And when he hired me, I remember he said, well, he was ready to hire me and train with me 4 or 5 days a week. And I told him, no, we're only going to work out twice a week. And luckily, I can be quite convincing. And so he said, okay, I'll trust you. And he got great results, and and we became friends. And Doug came to me one day and he said, you remind me of a young Tony Robbins, was what he said, which I thought was a really humbling compliment. And he said, if you ever want to market something online, if you ever want to, create something around fitness and market it online, I have a background in online marketing. And so I created the first workout program that we now sell on the podcast. And Doug and I put some marketing material together. And at the time, Adam Schaefer and I were in contact through social media. We had known each other mutually through friends. We were both, what would consider top producers in the big box gym industry. So we knew of each other, but never really met. And I wanted Adam's opinion on our marketing material. So I sent it to him. He got on the phone with me and we decided to meet. In that first meeting, we all sat down, and that's where I met Justin, who was, partners with Adam on a different business endeavor. We sat down and talked for 4 hours. I mean, it was right out the gates. Like we all were so aligned. so much chemistry. And we said, let's put this on a podcast. Doug has the recording equipment. Let's make a show. And we chose a podcast specifically because it was long form. You can't communicate fitness effectively in short form. It's a conversation. We knew this through training
Mhm.
people. We also knew there should be an entertaining component to it because, like we learned as trainers, if people are going to show up and see me for an hour or 2 hours every week for years in and years out, it can't just be about workouts. They have to enjoy
Yeah.
they have to enjoy it. So there's got to be, it's got to be fun and enjoyable and good, conversation, that kind of stuff. It's got to be a lot more than just fitness, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of the Mind Pump podcast. Granted, nobody had any media experience.
Mm.
Very evident if you listen to our first 300 episodes, you'll hear the complete lack of of media experience. But it seemed to have struck a chord and it resonated. And it, it's turned into what it is now. It's been an incredible and humbling blessing. But what you hear us communicate on the show is what we did with clients for years. I mean, Adam and Justin were also trainers and had worked with people for years and years. So that was the beginning of it all.
So two questions. In an endless sea of podcasts out there, how does something like this get a footing? And maybe to your point, I mean that's going to be my next question. Ultimately, it's the content, and
Yeah,
it's kind of this content that runs. I want to say in a loving way, afoul of all the conventional
yeah.
wisdom that's out there, that's supplement heavy and fast results and uber intense and all this kind of stuff. Is that the answer to how this got a footing? What's your sense about why Mind Pump resonated so much?
Gosh, that's a good question. Well, I know the first episode that went somewhat viral was at the time CrossFit, the style of CrossFit training had become very popular. And there's a lot of good things that CrossFit brought to the industry, but there was some bad things too. And they really glorified intensity, beating
Hmm.
yourself up. I could go into it, but we saw people getting hurt. We saw every day, people going into this style of workout that's really designed for competition that was super inappropriate. So one of our first viral episodes, because it was very popular at the time, CrossFit was very popular, was why Mind Pump doesn't CrossFit.
Hmm.
And we broke it down and we really explained why it's, how they do their programming, why it's not a good way to work out, why the intensity model is not the best approach. And that kind of took off. We also had, I think the entertainment component kind of contributed. And I'd say the third thing was, and we learned this is kind of how we are now, but when you train clients and really care about them, one thing you learn is, well, first off, if you want to be effective as a trainer, there's one thing is above all other things is that the person that you're working with has to completely trust you.
Hmm.
Okay. And the way you gain trust is not by being right all the time, not by being the most knowledgeable. It's by being vulnerable and honest.
Yeah.
So I learned this. I remember the first time I figured this out. I had a client who she had recovered from anorexia, and she was talking about her body image issues and what led her to, what led her to anorexia, and then how she kind of came out of it. And now she's working out, trying to be healthy. And I remember thinking to myself, like, is it appropriate that I tell her that I too struggled with body image issues, just different ones? And I said, what the heck? And I told her,
Yeah.
I said, well, I know exactly what that feels like. And I told her my story. And I remember how much more effective I was as a trainer after that. Like she's like,
Yeah.
oh, I trust this guy. And
Yeah.
so what you hear on the podcast is unbridled authenticity and honesty.
Mm, mm, mm.
And I think we got trained in that way. You figure it out that, that I need to be as honest and open as possible with my clients. If I really care about them, that'll get them to really get the best results long term. And I think that's the other part of the formula. But I don't know what the rest is, and I'd be lying if I said I knew the exact. I don't know. It feels a bit serendipitous, I guess. But those are the three components I can identify that I think made a difference.
It's funny because I thought when I was listening to these your various podcasts and reading up, interviews you've had and some of your writings and so on and so forth, I figured that I had learned what your secret sauce was. And it's funny you say what you just said. It's honesty, it's common sense, it's a hunger for truth. And again, I'm just saying this, as a doctor that deals with a lot of medical issues. And again, I'm not in the same degree, at any way in the same degree of expertise that you have with fitness per se, but listening to your podcast on semaglutide augmented by
Oh.
a higher protein diet or weightlifting, your podcast about skepticism regarding supplements, your podcast about proper balance in fitness, about the notion of moderation. Um, it's again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but so much of this message is not what one would normally hear from what you'd expect to be
Mhm.
the uber, exercising fitness gurus that are out there. And so that is, and so it's refreshing. I mean, people are drawn, as you said, people are drawn to authenticity. I was going to ask you also, in the midst of an industry that pushes a lot of narratives that you don't necessarily agree with, or you flat out disagree with, has it been liberating to you and your partners and the co-hosts? Has been liberating for you to think critically and to speak your mind in the milieu that you're practicing in?
I mean, well, yeah, but it's funny. It's like we don't know any better. Like we're not media people, so we were never trained
Yeah,
with
yeah,
media. So for better or worse, look. I'll give you a great example. Our sponsors love us because we convert more sales for them than anybody else on a download per download basis.
mm,
But when we first worked with sponsors, they were a lot of times uneasy about the relationship with us because we were so honest. I'll give you an example. Okay. We
yeah,
worked with a company that sold these mushroom extract supplements. And so there's certain mushrooms that have some effects, like cordyceps might improve athletic performance. Reishi might have some anxiolytic effects. So just to get a couple examples, right? So
yeah.
we were talking about one of the products. I brought up some studies that showed maybe some improved athletic benefits. And Adam goes, "Oh, you know what?" He goes, "I did notice a little bit more stamina in my workouts, but man, it tastes terrible." Okay, this was the commercial. Now I remember that the sponsor sent us a really angry email. The sponsor gets on and goes, "You guys need to pull that. Pull that. You can't say it tastes terrible." And we responded and said, "Look, our consumers are going to taste it. Okay, they're going to see that it tastes terrible.
They're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't you wait and see how many sales that we produce before you decide whatever?" And then the numbers came back and they said, "Never mind. Just keep doing what you're doing." So I mean, we're also trying to prove that you can be honest in an industry that lies
Yeah,
and still build a business. So, what happens is we tell our audience this works, this doesn't work, this happens, this doesn't happen. They trust us and we
yeah.
will not compromise that for anything. We've turned down a
How
lot
no
of money.
how novel, by the way, how
Yeah.
novel, just the straight dope, right?
Yeah, and we will not compromise that for anything. We've turned down a lot of partnerships and sponsors because of that. But at the end of the day, it's like, we want to see people do well. And also, like I said, we're not trained media people, so again, we don't necessarily have the best filters. It's gotten us in trouble
Yeah,
in the past, but you know, what's cool is I've developed this really tight partnership and friendship with my business partners to where I mean, if it destroyed the business, it destroys the business. We'll start over, but we're not
yeah.
going to compromise our
Boy, that's
integrity
great.
for money. But the good news is it's turned into a great business and it seems to be working. I think people want that. I think people desire that.
Yeah, it's great. The mind pump approach to fitness seems to involve all aspects of the person. And a favorite quote of mine, which I've mentioned him earlier, from Sir William Osler, the godfather of internal medicine, and he's the Johns Hopkins kind of trailblazer. He said, "The good physician treats the disease. The great physician treats the patient who has the
Oh
disease."
wow.
Sal, what in your opinion have you discovered about the connection between the health of mind, body, and soul along the way here?
Oh gosh. You know, we separate them, but good luck trying to
Yeah,
separate them. Like an unhealthy body produces an unhealthy mind. Those behaviors tend to produce negative effects on your soul and vice versa. I mean, it's all of it. You know what I love about the pursuit of fitness?
hmm,
If you stay on it long enough, you figure that out. It's this wonderful vehicle for personal growth. So, I mean, all of it is health. It's all
yeah,
health. Like you need to work on the health of your soul so that you have meaning and purpose in your life, so that you have that 40,000, um, mile view of life and what's going on, so they can bring you joy, whether life is hard or not. Right? You
yeah,
need to involve behaviors that improve your physical health and fitness because otherwise you're living in a shell that is constantly filtering the world in a way that's negative, inflammatory, painful, and so on. And then you need to work on your mind, which, by the way, is part of the body, or at least the
Mm.
result of the body, for the same reason. So I don't see how any of them, how you can work on one without working on the other one, or at least not affecting the other ones. So they're all very important. Now, how you approach it, step by step, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's all health. Try being healthy with a fit body and a healthy mind, but a unhealthy soul.
Yeah.
Or pick one of the other ones, right? It's very challenging. Um, by the way, people tend to start through physical fitness, then move to mind, eventually move to soul.
Yeah.
And you'll see this in MySpace. You'll see fitness influencers who then they do this for 7, 8, 10 years. Next thing you know, they're doing ayahuasca, or they're talking about crystals and energy and what. And you go, okay, here we go. They're on the soul path now. They're trying to find the truth. That was me. That was me. I did that for not with the crystals and the ayahuasca,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but that was my path, eventually leading
Yeah.
me to
Yeah.
the to improving the health of my soul.
I want to ask you. So let's shift a little bit. So what made you've had Bishop Barron on
Yeah.
a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken. Um, what led to that invitation, and what were the fruits? What were the fruits of that conversation?
Well, I was raised Catholic, but we were like Christmas, Catholics, right? We'd go to church on
Christmas and
Christmas.
Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I became an atheist. And I mean, I was a real atheist in the sense that, like, I was searching. So, and I've discovered this now, like, atheists who actually think about these things,
Hmm.
you can have conversations with them and they eventually start to move towards where I am now. But I was atheist because I thought about these things a lot. And the information that was out there was like, okay. And then I became more agnostic because the more I studied and learned, the more I said, oh, well, it's pretty arrogant of me to say that there's no God, because it's obviously much more mysterious than I thought.
Hmm.
So I became more agnostic. And then this at the time Jordan Peterson was growing large on social media, and he talked about the wisdom of the Bible from a practical, I guess you would, for lack of a better term, standpoint. And I said, wow, there's a
Yeah.
lot of wisdom in these practices. And one in particular was the understanding that we're all born with inalienable rights. I said that is not an obvious thing to think about. Like,
Yeah.
what's more obvious is that I'm big, you're small, I take from you what I want. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I said, so what an interesting concept that led to the modern Western civilization, which is constantly progressing.
Yeah.
And I said, that's weird. That came from the Judeo-Christian practices. There's a lot of wisdom here. And then
Mhm.
I found a video of Bishop Barron talking about Jordan Peterson. And Bishop Barron, as you know, he comes at you very intellectually. And
Yeah.
that's how I get that's how I first receive information.
Mhm.
And I was like, man, I would love to sit down and ask him questions
Yeah.
for myself personally. And I thought, let's have him on the podcast, which at the time was a little bit like, should we have him on the podcast? What are our fans going to think? Luckily, my co-hosts are like I am. We do what we want. So we said, whatever.
There it
If it
is.
works out great. Yeah. So we flew down to Santa Barbara. And that first interview with Bishop Barron was genuinely me asking him questions for myself.
Hmm.
And I was so moved by the people on his team and his staff. I remember I met Father Steve right
Mhm.
away, and Father Steve is this priest that lifts weights, right? So he's more than that. He's a great guy, great
Yeah.
friend of
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
But I looked at him like, whoa, you work out. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh. And he's like, I like your show. And so we became, friends. And that whole experience put me on a path towards Christianity and Catholicism,
Mm.
that I'm out on now. I'm still on it. But that was the door that opened.
What did you find as you're sitting and talking and asking questions of Bishop Barron? What were there any epiphanies, or any long held questions? You're like, boy, that put it in a new light. Was there anything that sticks? I mean, I imagine there was a number of them, but anything that just really emerges in your consciousness, say, gosh, there was something I was kind of hung up on, and that when he said that, or when he
Yeah.
pointed in this direction, or I've taken on this practice, or whatever the case may be, it opened. It was a step, kind of like your fitness. It
Yeah.
was a step in the right direction. What's your sense about that?
Well, I don't know how he phrases it. I think it's like the problem of evil, or something along those
Hmm.
lines. Like, why does
Hmm.
evil
Hmm.
even exist?
Yeah.
And I think he said this to me. I don't know if he said this on the show or off air, but he said, if like, why does Hitler exist, or why was he allowed to do it? He said, "Well, and it's very complicated, but he said something along the lines of, if we didn't have Hitler, we wouldn't have had Schindler." And I thought, holy Toledo, like,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it really gripped me, that in order to you have to have the choice to do evil in order to do good.
yeah,
Otherwise, neither one. I mean, you have to,
yeah,
and so it's a gift. And of course, a lot of times we make the wrong decisions. But that one right there really struck me
yeah,
because it
yeah.
answered a fundamental question and challenge that I had.
I'll just say this, that for I'm a Catholic that came in 2010. I was a Lutheran growing up, and I became, it was a long slog of a wrestling match between me and God, and every so often my wife got in the middle of it because she was a Catholic and always kind of talking
Yeah,
to me, about what direction I was going in and all this kind of stuff. And I will tell you that it was Bishop Barron, in watching the Catholicism series.
yeah,
I don't know if you've seen
I
that, but
have.
it's yes, it's Emmy award winning, blah blah blah, but it's 10 hours of beautiful, sweeping theology, mysticism, intellectual richness, aestheticism, etc., that embodies what the faith is. And for me, it was again, here he is looking kind of like a linebacker walking down a dirt road talking about Thomas Aquinas, and I'm like, this guy is onto something here, and it just made me hunger for more and more and more. So having a tendency or propensity to come at things intellectually, like you, when someone meets you there and says, "Hey, I want to show you something. Come on with me." And boy, I bet you're gonna be as excited about it as I was when I first came across it. And before long, you're saying, "You're right. That is exciting," and you want more. And so along the lines of the growth that you've outlined in this whole conversation of step by step by step, it doesn't have to start fiery and fierce
No.
and fervent. And as I would say, my conversion personally it was not Saul being knocked off a horse and being blinded, and then there you go, I'm Paul. Mine was like a thousand brushstrokes on a portrait, that it was one over the years, just one stroke at a time. And until years pass, you look back and you say, I couldn't see what the portrait was painting, but now I do. And
Yes.
it's me finding my way into the church and so on. So I think, again, running, you're wonderfully contrarian to the culture, and that you're sitting down with a bishop on a health and
Yeah.
fitness podcast, and having honest and deep and earnest and unvarnished questions about the ultimate things in life. And that's why people follow you guys so much, because you're legit.
I
You're
appreciate
you're
that.
earnest.
I appreciate that. That was a big one for us.
Sal Di Stefano, fitness trainer, entrepreneur, and host of the Mind Pump podcast. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure talking with you.
Todd, thank you so much. It's been actually a great conversation. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm going to listen to your show. I really love the way you communicate. It. Didn't listen to your show before, but I'm really interested now. So thank you.
So I've been thinking. To be honest, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. In an age of unapologetic vanity served by extreme plastic surgery and unsafe dietary supplements, unfounding diet fads, and self destructive workout fashions, what, I asked myself, would I find in Sal Di Stefano, the co host of Mind Pump, the number one health and fitness podcast in the world? Well, actually, I'd find something quite refreshing. I found unhampered curiosity and common sense. As an internal medicine physician who has been practicing for over 20 years, I am struck by the enormous quantity of research being conducted on health and fitness. Research whose results have been used unashamedly to market products and programs to the public. This has made a small number of people a lot of money. At the same time, I've been dismayed by how shoddy the quality of that research often is. In medicine, gold standard research studies are large, randomized, double blind, placebo controlled trials with hard endpoints. That is, endpoints that matter, like death, stroke, or heart attack. However, these studies are often expensive, time consuming, and cumbersome, but they are the best that we have. Because of the expense and ardor of RCTs, that is, randomized controlled trials, the scientific community has often settled for inferior trials that try to guide or at least hypothesize so that a better trial could be undertaken. As a result, observational trials, a favorite form of suboptimal trial, are performed, published in major journals, quoted in the news, and voila, deemed gospel truth in the public square. Wherever the news reaches the people, the ultimate mic drop seems to be research shows, or studies say, or the science proves. Time and again, in under a minute, an expert, quote unquote, will then quote statistics from a trial that few listening have ever heard of, much less read, and people are convinced that science has spoken. But the devil is in the details. How many people were in the study? Who was excluded? How long was the study performed? What were the confounding variables? What were the endpoints? How do its findings comport with other research on the same topic? We have to remember that great journals still publish trash studies. We have to acknowledge that just because someone doesn't have a drug company sponsoring them doesn't mean that there isn't money or ego at stake in the study's publication. And statistics can be massaged to make them seem more momentous than they are. Just ask any average medical student the difference between relative risk reduction and absolute risk reduction and how they are used or not used in marketing. It's striking. It's no wonder that British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli once scoffed, "There are three types of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics." Sal Di Stefano has made his living doing the opposite of the health and fitness industry. He uses common sense, dismisses expensive, unproductive, and unfounded fitness nonsense, and encourages a down-to-earth, holistic approach that weds the health of mind, body, and soul. When I talked to Sal and listened to his many interviews and conversations, here is a take-home message I discovered. Enjoy good, wholesome food, but watch your portions. Exercise to build your endurance and muscle, but not to excess. Avoid unnecessary and unproven supplements. Get a good night's sleep. Spend time with your family. Discern the big questions of your soul. Stimulate your mind. Don't worship health, but be healthy. To stay on the straight path, find balance, balance, balance. For a popular fitness expert and podcaster, this message is refreshingly old school and, to my medical mind, extremely effective. To look good and feel good, you have to be good, day after day. This takes vision and discipline, patience and steadiness. That's some good advice, Sal Di Stefano. I think I'll keep listening. And one last thing. Of course, I will recommend that you tune into Sal Di Stefano's podcast, Mind Pump, for a dose of clarity amidst health and fitness confusion. But I would also recommend reading Gary Saul Morrison's essay, The Greatest of All Novels. It is a reflection on Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, but it especially unfolds the dangers of boxy thinking and the need for alertness and good sense to navigate the fickle and contingent reality we encounter every day. Morrison's essay reminds us of the imperative that to live well, we need to think well. Thank you once again for joining me on the Evangelization Culture Podcast. I'm Todd Warner, and until we meet again, keep bringing Christ to a hungry culture.